Welcome to the English Wine Collection's Wine Talks British Business podcast. This episode is with Tamara Roberts from the English sparkling wine brand Ridgeview. Ridgeview's story is one of family. Tamara, like so many in the English wine trade, started on a completely different career path. Qualifying as a lawyer, she then retrained as an accountant. This proved useful to her as she learned how to run an effective business whilst auditing others. Ridgeview first planted the vineyard in 1995 with 20 acres of vines, and the first wines were available to the market in 2000. Tamara says that Ridgeview embraces new things and it's important to keep pushing forward. Still very much a family business, they use each other's skills to ensure that they stick to what they know. Above all, the product is paramount. Tamara, welcome to the English Wine Collection's Wine Talks British Business podcast. Thank you very much for making the time and welcoming us to beautiful Ridgeview today on what is a glorious sunny day. Could you tell me about your career? Where did it start for you and the way you are now being at the helm of Ridgeview, as it were?
I started probably a million miles away from wine, actually.
Sounds great.
As I think probably plenty of people in the in the English wine industry have done. Being in such a fledgling state, it tends to attract people in second careers, investing, from one business into another, change of lifestyle.
Yeah.
And that's really how the family came to it, was with my parents selling a business that they created in the 80s, which was IT based. And I think...
So what specifically IT in the 80s? Because there's not a huge amount of it back then.
No, so from the very beginnings of starting a business from our lounge. So my dad was a finance director of a large multinational stationery company. Stationery, yeah. He'd worked in the oil and gas industry, so he'd sort of worked his way up in the finance world, sort of as a financial controller director. That was his bag back then. And he saw in the sort of early 80s computers were coming in. He flagged that to the board of directors that the company was in and said, you need to get into this. It's the next thing. It's going to be big. They basically said no. So he basically handed his notice in and went home and started from our lounge to buy and resell BBC computers back then. Those, so the sort of the start, the Amstrads, all those sorts of things which were around at the beginning.
Big computers.
Yeah, and then started. So got a shop in our local town, a shop front where he would sell really to consumers mainly, and a few local businesses, IT hardware, and support some software needs and repair. So he'd do repairs. Back then, when you would actually repair stuff that was worth repairing, they'd come in for repair and go out to a little workshop there. Then moved that on to about 500 employees over the decade, a big sort of firm.
That's quick.
Yeah, and really just, I suppose, timing is everything in these things. Having the idea, the determination, the drive, the timing was right. And started was the biggest IBM reseller in the southeast, working with clients such as Marks and Spencers, so big corporate clients, and then sold that to an American company in the early 90s, which then led us on to the new-found career of a winemaker at Ridgeview. So that was really the journey prior to Ridgeview and how the family got into wine. My journey was at that time. I'd spent, I was quite involved on a sort of a holiday basis and those sorts of things in the business, the IT business. So I had a great opportunity to work in most departments there when it was up and running. And I think that's what really interested me. I found the whole functioning of a business and the growth of a business really quite interesting, and enjoyed working within it in the different areas and how they all interlinked. And probably back then I didn't see the benefit of it, but looking back on it, you have quite rose-tinted spectacles and actually that was pretty good.
Sure.
And I was the first in the family to go to university. So I was quite determined to go and do that. And I wanted to do a noble subject. So I went and did law up at King's College in London, after doing pretty well at A level. And after that, didn't really fancy a career in law. Went, I suppose, to postpone a final decision, went into a chartered accountancy and worked at what was initially Coopers and Lybrand and became PricewaterhouseCoopers and became a chartered accountant.
Why did you swap from being training?
I'd like to say it was something really profound, but I think it was actually I did one of those personality checks where you look at, and actually on the back of that they said, oh, you might be quite good at this. I'm like, well, I'll do that then. And I thought it's another qualification. It's 3 years I'm probably going to be quite good at it. And I found it really interesting. It's a little bit dry in places, sort of the subject matter. And you get accountants who are very accountanty, and there are accountants who are more commercial. So you sort of get to know a vast array of different people, which is great. And you're constantly going in and out of businesses because you're auditing them. So again, huge learning curve. But after qualifying, I went into industry, and I was in London, so a lot of my work was around financial services, so banking, insurance. So I fell into a job at NatWest in the sort of financial analyst team. It took me a while to get a hang of what was going on there, and then all of a sudden Royal Bank of Scotland came in and took them over. So I worked on the merger between the two banks for a year or so before moving out of that into a slightly smaller company called Mondex, which was which was the first proponent of cashless cashless cards. So you have I'm not explaining this very well, but basically cards that would work like cash. So you could tap.
Isn't that what a normal card is now?
But there's no traceability of the transactions. So it is...
Right, okay.
It's like having a preloaded cash card that you can just go and spend money on. It was actually part owned by MasterCard. So eventually after I think I was there for about 2.5, 3 years as a financial controller, they got taken over by MasterCard. And I dropped out and decided then to come out of London because I'm from this area. I've lived I used to live in Brighton quite a lot. I live on site in Ditchling now, but I do love this area. I love you can get into Brighton. Brighton's one of my favourite places. It's just really fun, I suppose. That's what it's a really fun place, but it's big enough to be of interest too. It's a real destination, I think, for Londoners as well in the summer.
So is that chance then why the Vineyards here? Then?
I think we've all loved this area, and so we've always lived around here. So there isn't really a chance that it's here. It's here because I think that there's two reasons. One is it was the timing when my parents were looking to start this venture. This place was up for sale, and it had great aspects. South facing, you can see from here that the South Downs are the view basically, which is the Ridgeview, as it were, Ridge of the South Downs. Lovely south facing, gentle sloping fields. We have one here and another one just to the, I always get this wrong, west of us here. Get my directions right. And so it was a bit fortuitous, and we used to live literally a couple of miles up the road was where the other house was. So this came along. We didn't have to move miles away, which was nice. But by then, both my brother and I were at university doing other things. So my brother was building boats down in Falmouth. He was doing a boat building course.
Oh, wow.
Because we all really love sailing and been doing a lot of sailing. We've both all done fastnet race. So we've done a lot of racing through cows and fastnet racing and all that sort of stuff. Very much something my father really loved doing, and it was, I suppose, his way of building relationships with his children as well, because it was something we all did together in those sort of late teens, that sort of time. So we'd all come down, go. We had a boat down at Southampton, just close to Southampton, called Hamble, and we'd sail from there and do winter racing, spring racing. We did Cows Weeks. And also fastnets and things like that. So, we had a great time for, I suppose, about 10 years really doing
Sounds
that
wonderful,
stuff.
yeah.
It was great. And that sort of generated the interest from my brother to go down and look at, a boat building course down in Falmouth at the time.
Okay.
And I was up in London and doing my various law, finance, that sort of stuff. And we came back here. I remember me and my brother when... we planted this vineyard. We were sitting just watching the planters going up and down, at the Rose, thinking, what on earth is going on? What are we doing now? Because when your parents turn to you and say, we're going to plant a vineyard, and we're like, oh, okay. And you think you're slightly mad.
Sure, yeah, that would be.
But I suppose we're so used to them doing things like that. And so, the fact that they, when we were younger, started a business from our lounge, although it was a bit strange, you just fall into it. And I suppose you grow up in that environment of like, oh, you're going to do something different. You're going to have your own thing. It's always been on your own businesses.
Okay. So quite spontaneous, but very energetic about it and enthusiastic.
And for a while, I think with everything they've done, all the ventures they've done, it's been very well considered, thought out, planned. So it's never really been a sort of an off the cuff thing. For a while when they said that, they've done all that work.
Planning,
it's been planned, and they've got it all ready to go. And I just remember just sitting there. And my brother at that point was back. I think he had it was either summer. I think he must have been coming into his summer holidays from his course, and he got involved and started to help out on the vineyards, etc. And I think maybe his course had finished by that point. And so
that was here.
So he just sort of, as a, I'm back for summer, I'll give you a hand type thing, and never left really. And I think that found a love of. Firstly in the vineyard, and then came into the winery as soon as we started getting into the winemaking side of things, and worked alongside Dad and some consultants at that point. Plumpton College, which is literally just up the road.
Of course, yeah.
Was in its very early days of offering a winemaking, courses, but now a far cry from where it is now with its own winery, etc. A couple of chicken sheds and some buckets, I think my dad would say it was back then, and the wonderful Chris Foss there leading the charge, but
with his buckets and chickens.
With his buckets, yeah. But he made a start. I mean, and look where it is now. So he was ahead of the game, indeed. And
so then you got involved.
Then I came involved, and actually I didn't come involved. So we planted in 1995.
Right.
It's about 20 acres of vines we have here, and it wasn't really. I came on board in 2004 as the general manager, because obviously 1995 you plant some vines. You've got a 3-year period of just waiting for the vines to establish. In the third year, you'll get a small harvest,
of course,
something very tiny, and then you start to build from there. So you're looking really at about 6 years between planting a vine and actually having any product ready for sale. So we weren't really seeing our first wines didn't really come onto the market until the year 2000, that sort of time. There was a little bit before that, but the sort of the more commercial volumes were coming on there. I say commercial in a very sort of a small commercial way, because we were very small back then.
Well, it was starting.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But going out to sort of retailers and various other things at that time, trying to find customers was around that sort of time. And so we then started to win awards, which was, domestically initially. And getting very excited by all of that. And my parents at that time took a bit of a busman's holiday to South Africa and went to have a look at the wineries around there. And again, back in the early 2000s, the wine industry in South Africa was really just establishing too. It hadn't been around. It hadn't been it hadn't grown to the extent it is now. Back then, it was still early days, and they were just astounded by the amount of investment that had gone into the industry over there, and just I think it sparked their imagination quite a bit as to what the potential is for a small growing region like ourselves, with a bit of investment and and time. So they came back really, really enthused, and then we had a family meeting. I remember in sort of early 2004 about what to do with the business, because whether to grow it or just keep it as it is, a 20-acre vineyard, tapping over, selling locally, wines, getting tours in and doing that, or actually looking a bit further ahead and growing it to an SME, and beyond. And it was, I think, all the whole family were quite, let's do this. And that's when I came in 2004 as general manager.
Okay.
And started to really gear the business up for both internally, so as processes, systems, starting to formalise a lot of the infrastructure internally with getting new people in, but also working very hard on the strategy in terms of with how firstly, we need more grapes if we're going to grow. How are we going to do that? Will that be something we invest in ourselves? But we took the decision to go down a much more champagne type route, having growers separate, contract growers, bringing grapes into us. For us, it was spreading the growing risk. We knew that, each site would have
England.
It is England, there's, and the weather can be very, very different a few miles up the road from each other, and to have different soil types, different weather issues, and to spread that risk across the southeast, really, mainly Sussex, but we have some Kent, Essex, and Suffolk, those sorts of areas too.
Sure.
In the latter, more recently, they've come onto us, but to have that gave us the opportunity to expand, I think, quicker, because we didn't have to make the investment into land and vines, which is not very cheap around here. So
and takes time.
It takes a lot of time. Yeah. And we could then invest much more heavily in the facilities here, winemaking, and that sort of experience and knowledge. So that's the decisions we took back then, and saw, the business grow on the back of that to, I know we started around 20,000 bottles, 50, 90, and up to now we're about 300,000 bottles.
Sure.
And it's been very organic in the way that we've done that, reinvestment of profits constantly through that period.
Is that mainly from, as you say, yourselves, or are you getting outside investment?
We had a little bit of outside investment. One of our biggest growers, Timwood, the family invested a small amount when they decided to grow, just to give us the capital to extend the winery accordingly.
Great.
But other than that, no, it's all been from profits generated from the business.
That's
really
brilliant.
Yeah, and very supportive banks. Which actually was very tough in the early days, because people, they didn't have a clue what we were doing.
It was new.
Yeah, exactly. And obviously very risky from their point of view. So it did. We had it did take it took really a very good bank manager from one of the banks to nurse us through those first 10, 15 years. And
a willing bank
manager. Someone who's going to put their neck on the line for us. And he did, and it worked really well. And nowadays, I think the amount of coverage the industry gets is much more, I would hardly say it's mainstream, but it's much more known and understood. Yeah. There's many more reference points, more businesses out there. So it has made that financing piece a lot easier moving forward.
And that's led you, as you say, to where you are.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I mean, that leads great onto what I wanted to discuss with you, because Ridgeview, you have had or are having such a wonderful success.
Yeah.
Along with the industry, but Ridgeview in particular, been served at many locations, and I just wanted to touch on a couple here with you. So Buckingham Palace is one of them, 10 Downing Street. But, picking this up from you is that you're still a family business. You still seem to have like these core beliefs and the structures. That must be really important to you.
I think it's really important to us. I think as long as the family are, and I think it's really important that the family enjoy and are engaged in what we do.
Sure.
I think the nice thing about us is that we have, so my brother and myself, we get on very, very well, but we have very different. We're very. He wouldn't want to be running the business like I am and doing the financial side, and he loves the winemaking and that side of things. So we've naturally kind of gone into the roles that we enjoy, but have good skills to do, which I think has been really important. So there hasn't ever been that sort of internal. Unrest in terms of who's doing what in the business. It's just naturally played out as you'd expect, really. And I think that we're all still really enjoy what we do. We understand the vocational part of this sort of work as well. For us, the product is paramount, and everything we do will come from having a really good product. So all the investment that we've made to date really has been around making the product as good as we possibly can. Equipment, facilities, people involved in that process has been the priority.
Where's that come from? Is that something that you learned, or?
I think, I think, we've been very lucky to have the parents that we have, because they are the ones who have driven this who started this process. And, we've been in a very fortunate position just to keep moving it on. I mean, the bedrock was them saying, this is how we're going to do it. We're not going to cut any corners. I think my dad straight away was, this is not this wine is going to be served in the top restaurants, top hotels, the top, we're not in a market, we're not going to be selling in markets. So he had a very good vision in terms of where the wine and product was going to be, how it was going to be sold, who was going to be drinking it.
Can you think of any advice that he gave you? Because, as you said, that's a brilliant one. This is where we're heading towards.
Yeah.
How did he give you any advice to get there, or apart from just determination, which I'm picking up on mother?
Yeah, no, exactly. I think with him, he's just a natural leader by example. I mean, he's a hands-on. He would be hands-on in the winery, hands-on in various other things. So you learn working with him. I think for him to sit, he'd never be one of those people to sit down and say, this is how I want to do it, now go off and get on with it.
Okay.
He would always be very actively involved in those next steps.
I mean, everything you've said about your family, discussing them, that's exactly what you said. Everybody is involved.
Everybody's in it, doing it. And even from the smallest things, if something needs doing, it will get done by somebody. Okay. It doesn't matter, whether it's, say, for example, cleaning behind a press or something like that. Everyone will be hands-on doing stuff. And I think that's it.
Later.
Yeah, I'll be doing that. Getting my mop out and doing stuff. But the attention to detail, and I think that's the thing that's key to me is that attention to detail in terms of, don't ever overlook something as menial or that's perceived to be as menial as those sorts of things, because it's all of those little things that add up to make something great. And if you forget that detail, you're never going to reach that potential that you were striving towards.
It's like nursing it all together.
Yeah, exactly, and understanding just how important all all of those things are.
Which is family.
Exactly.
That's what you're saying. It's your family, your wines, the vineyard.
And how keeping it all together is so super important.
So why did you decide to focus just on sparkling?
Again, that was a decision made right at the very beginning, before the first vines were even planted, that the climate, the geology, in order to make a product that was consistent and could have, maintain the quality standards that we wanted. So consistent in terms of you were going to get something from the vines every year on whole. And secondly, the quality element of that was actually, it had to be sparkling. It had to follow the region that was closest to us in terms of distance, geology, climate, which is the Champagne region.
Yeah.
And there's a very good reason why they, again, don't have a very big or never very tiny amount of still wines being made there. There is some, but their focus, again, is on the sparkling. And I think that one of the major criticisms before we planted and went into the industry from resellers and retailers, when you spoke to them about English wines previously, it was great. They're great. In 1 year, you can have a fantastic wine and there's loads of it. Then you get it on your list. 2 years later, there's nothing. Yeah. It's gone, or it's not as good. Mm. So that inconsistency was making it very difficult for retailers and resellers to get behind the industry. Whereas with sparkling wines, because of how you need at the end of a season, you actually want low sugar, high acidity, which is what you'll get from a growing season in this cool climate. Mm-hmm. You're always going to hit those sort of the standards that you need in order to make this style of wine. Do you have quite a lot of reserve base wines then to help with that, so you can get, what the Ridgeview staple is? Yeah. I mean, if I'm going to be honest, no, not for a long time. We haven't. It's all been vintage based, and I think that's to do with us being, a growing business, which is focused. We need to finance ourselves. Yeah. So from our perspective, we had to make everything we could to sell it in order to afford to do, the following year's vintage and the following year's vintage. It's only recently in the last 5 years that we've got to the position where we can start to do more of that reserving situation, and now the reserves program is coming in. So you will start to see what we try to do on the vintage wines in terms of keeping that consistency year on year in is with the beauty of this type of wine is you can blend out some of those ups and downs,
of course,
with the, skilled blending, which my brother was great at and still is, in terms of actually this Chardonnay's a little bit zippy this year. We'll add a little bit more Pinot into the blend, etc. So just to try and even out. I mean, there would always be differences, and always characters of the vintage, which again was very endearing to people in the trade because they felt they were getting something quite unique.
That's the character of Ridgeview, almost,
exactly.
Isn't it? More wines.
Yeah. And so now we have with the non-vintage program again, we've got a blending tool as well to help bring those things. And what you don't want to do is have a dramatic change in your style.
Absolutely.
So that has to be managed very carefully as you bring all those different things in. A little bit like having different growers coming in, is that all needs to be managed quite carefully because they bring something different to the blends.
Sure.
And for Simon, that's his where he's starts to understand, when he gets to know what those sites are bringing in, he can start to subtly bring those into the blends or understand how that's going to influence the wines moving forward.
When you have your Ridgeview style then, as you say, because you use all these other grapes. So you touched on it briefly, so you're in the process of building a new winery.
Yes.
I believe. How's it going?
It's going very well. We the devil is in the detail in the planning side of it. It did take about a good 18 months, 2 years to get off the ground. Just to get it right, we have cellars here in the original winery, and we were hoping initially the first plans were to have cellars again. Then they looked like it was going to be too expensive, so they had to come out. But now we've gone back to actually having cellars, a full-length cellar for about 1 million bottles under the new winery side of things, and then a shed on top. And what it will enable us to do, because we're very let's just say we've sweated the assets that we've got here. Everything's very compact. we've made the most of the space, very focused.
Yeah.
But what that has is made it. But we can't grow anymore with what we've got with the space we have, and B, does make you slightly inefficient as well. If you have to move 3 things to get to the thing you want to do every time you're trying to do a process. Obviously, it's a bit mind-numbing to do all that. So it will give us the breathing space to have that additional space for growth, where we've got coming through with new growers coming on board, but also I think make our product more efficient, and just focus on that quality at each stage of the process.
So did this fall rather neatly in line with your rebranding as well? Because you've got beautiful new bottle designs. Was this all part of it, or was that just coincidence?
I think those plans have been they've probably been under consideration for this similar sort of time. We knew we were coming up to the point of needing more space, and we knew also that we were coming with so many new brands coming on the market that actually it was time to look quite closely at the look and feel of our brand, because the designs we had predominantly came from 1995 and have been tweaked and amended, maybe a slight change in the mid-2000s. But we were looking a little bit dated, a little bit, I would say more, we'd followed a lot of the champagne cues in the design back then, which was probably the right thing to do. But we felt when we were looking at the design this time around, it's actually English wine has really started to have its own entity and become itself, and doesn't need to pretend to be a champagne, or doesn't need to fool a customer or consumer into thinking it's, that
we don't have to fit in with that.
We don't need to fit in. And so we felt, no, let's do something that we love and fits with us, and and it's the style that we went for. It did take, I have to say, it's quite a process redesigning, because you're so you've got a lot of opinions in there. Fortunately, the family actually as a whole all agreed on the same thing. There was no sort of disputes. No sort of major arguments about which designs it were. We all sort of eventually fell into the same, liking the same style and designs. And
how important is that for your brand? Because you see, you've got the family. If you've all come to the same conclusion, that's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, exactly. And I think then that's it, because it's about that. It's about the brand, and everyone's behind it and focused on it. If you've got half thinking I'm not so keen on it, then you don't have the confidence, do you? And I think it's really important that you all feel really confident in your offering and that product and how it looks. And it's hugely important. And to be honest, I don't think we would have rebranded unless we had that, united, in terms of unanimous consent.
So you're all very comfortable to come up with fresh ideas, keep pushing things forward.
And we do. And we always like to. I think businesses can't stand still. I think actually that's a good thing that my dad always used to say to me, and that was it. It was that the business can't stand still. We have to do something. If you stand still, you go backwards. So that is always in the back of my mind. That you always have to be looking. What's the next thing? And nowadays you have to be looking at what are your competitors doing as well. It's become much more competitive.
And there are more and more competitors.
More and more competitive. Who's coming into the market? What are they doing? How and I do think it's ideas can come from all sorts of walks of life, and it's really important not to get too tunnel visioned into your own industry and see what other industries are doing. Get out networking, talk to people, get their opinions on the business, and because an idea doesn't necessarily have to come from a competitor or another wine industry. Could come from from another luxury good doing something and think actually that would work really, really well here. And I think that's because we've got quite a breadth of business in terms of how we market and sell our products. Not only do we sell through supermarkets and wholesalers, direct to restaurants, wine specialist retailers. But also we sell, directly from here, and they're all very different propositions. And we have a tourism aspect and a leisure aspect to consider as well. So there's actually a lot of areas of the business that you can play and do different things with, which is really great.
And I'm really picking up on you've got the energy to do it, and that's what's important. You can invest in it and then really explore these different avenues.
And I think that's where we've sort of seen, perhaps the biggest change for us is that we know that, we need expertise in some of those areas to help, because the family can only do so much. There's only 4 of us really at the end of the day, myself, my brother, Marty, my brother's wife, and my husband, Simon. My mum's still around as well and involved on sort of the estate management, how it looks, which looks great all the time. She's great. And so, we know full well that we need to sort of replicate that energy in good people with experience and expertise in those areas. We're not experts in everything, and it's bringing the right people in at the right time to then help to build to grow those areas. Really,
it's very much a team, isn't it? If you say with your family, people you're bringing in, it's the extension of your family, which is your brand, and how you represent yourselves.
Yeah.
So on that note, you're obviously doing incredibly well, and you've received many, I'm just going to get this right, so you've got many accolades, and you've got World's Best Wine Producer at the International Wine and Spirits Competition. That must have been a pat on the back, should we say, at least. I mean, what did that mean to you?
I think it was, we took a last minute decision actually to go to the awards ceremony last November.
Yeah.
And the family went. Actually, it was partly actually it fell that the awards ceremony actually fell on the 4th anniversary of Dad's passing away. Right. So it was on the same night. So we were sort of umming and ahhing about it. We thought, no, actually it was good. It was one of his favourite award ceremonies where he loved the International Wine and Spirits Competition. Really, reason being is they have this fantastic tasting in the crypt at the Guildhall prior to the dinner. It just looks fabulous and just beautiful, beautiful setting. And back in 2005, we won our first major international award in that competition as well, which was the Arden Trophy back in the day. So the best sparkling wine, bottle fermented sparkling wine. So had a kind of a resonance there as well. We knew we'd won the category for English sparkling. We knew we'd done very well and got the gold medal, and we're up for an award there. Which early in the evening we won with the Marksman, which we make for Marks and Spencers. So in the dinner, and I think we thought that was it. We thought we've had our moment. That's great. We can all have a few drinks, have enjoy. Cheers to Dad, etc. Well done, well done. Yeah. And then towards the end of the evening, you had the Winemaker of the Year, the big awards, and we're all sitting back going, "Oh, who's going to get this?"
We're done.
Yeah, no, you're thinking, you're fascinated. Like, I wonder which part of the world will be getting it this year, and Ridgeview's on there, and we're like, "Oh, we're on the list." You thought, well, we've done really well. We're on the list. Brilliant, fabulous. That's great. At least we can go home thinking that we're amongst that sort of the world of wine, and we've made it. And I don't think we're all sitting there, and then when they called it out, I think our faces must have been an absolute picture. It was like jaw dropping, literally at that time. Going, oh my God. And I think probably the photos when you see us on the stage, just the Cheshire cat grins from side to side. And actually it has a lot of resonance just because it was probably the biggest award we've won since Dad passed away. And obviously for my brother and I, that was kind of a big sort of confidence boost that actually we've done it. We're doing it in our own right. We're doing really well. We've not let anything slip. We've not let anybody down. And I think thinking away, that actually did sort of made you just walk that little bit higher after that. You felt actually we're doing okay. We're doing really, really well. And we can do it. You know what I mean? We can do it. We can make it happen. So I think for a number of reasons, it had a lot of a big impact on us as a family.
As you say, it's good to get the pat on the back, and especially after with your father passing and being able to continue forward.
No, exactly, and you just you feel that little bit taller, and that you're still pushing, you're still at the forefront of the industry, which is always a worry, isn't it, with all these newbies coming on and thinking, oh my goodness, how do we've got to maintain our standard. We've got to keep at the foremost of everyone's mind in terms of when they're thinking about English wine, that Ridgeview has to be there somehow. So that was really good.
So some of the inspiration to be so dedicated and commitment is, as you just mentioned, having these other brands come along. Like, I've got to stay fresh, I've got to stay current, I've got to keep going. So you can draw inspiration, not necessarily from what other people are doing, but by their presence. You're like, right, well, we've got to get on.
Yeah. And I think it's really important to see what other people are doing and looking, because they're all going to have great ideas. And to think that you're the only people who can have those ideas is just foolish. You need to look and see, and people are going to have great ideas. And if you can adapt those ideas for yourself, then why not? I'm sure people are looking at what we do and adapting what they're doing, and that's absolutely the way it should be. And if if the industry is always striving for best practice across the board, then we've got a very rosy future ahead of us. It's when we all start racing to the bottom that we don't.
No, it's the old healthy competition.
That's absolutely right. Yeah, absolutely.
So speaking of which, you've got some rather different things happening at the Vineyards. So you've got a music festival.
Yes.
Is that right? Tell me about that.
So the focus for us really in the next 5 years is to obviously we've got the new winery facility. We're now looking at developing the retail, leisure, events side of the business too.
Okay.
We're in a great position. We're down the road is Brighton. You can get to London in 45 minutes. There's a train station not far from us.
Yeah. There's a marathon, as we were mentioning earlier.
There's a marathon, Danby's Marathon. So there's all sorts of things. So we have a great catchment area, as it were, for visitors to come. We're in the South Downs National Park, sitting here. So a very visited part of the country. And if we can just tap into some of that and have a really good offering here, so people can come enjoy a glass of wine, a little bit of food, the festivals that we have on, so we can bring people in and we can work alongside other local producers to bring in their products too.
So what do you do at the festivals?
We have the music, we have obviously Ridgeview wine predominantly, but we have beers, we have a few spirits, local spirit producers. We just have food stalls. So local food stalls coming in, so local restaurants who have their. So we just basically bring everything in. We make it as easy as it possibly is for us, so we're not having to offer everything, but also, have people to give their brand awareness for their brand as well.
It sounds like you're almost like your extended family, because you've been talking. It's so lovely to hear how your core beliefs are based around family. And you described it, you can bring other people in from the area and
exactly. People like Wobblegate, people who are cider producers. They're apple juice and they're moving to cider. Brighton Gin. There's just so many breweries around here. That actually you have to choose very carefully and make sure you don't favour one rather than the other and bring them all in. But and I think I certainly do think that the food side of the industry around here has just got so much better. And when you start scratching at the surface, you just see how many local producers there are, and it's fantastic because you've all kind of got a shared vision of what you want to do, and so working together is really pleasurable.
So speaking of working together, there's a certain family that you guys bottle wines for. Is this something we can go into? Are you allowed to elaborate a little bit on that?
Is that the Windsor?
It is the Windsor, yes.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting one. So, and again,
yes, it is.
It comes down and actually that really all comes from a very long-term and deep friendship as well as commercial relationships we've had with the Laithwaites family,
right,
who run Direct Wines.
Yeah.
And Tony Laithwaite and Hugh Johnson came knocking on our door very, very early on in our when we started Ridgeview, I think probably in the late 90s, wanting to take wine for their wine clubs. So they were very early adopters in terms of looking at English wines. Tony's wife also then planted a vineyard, which we made the wine for a short period, for a reasonable period, until her son also planted a vineyard closer to her and now does that side of the business for her. So that relationship's been going on for a very long time. And then Laithwaites, I think it was around 2010, if not a little bit before, secured a contract to plant a vineyard on the Queen's Estate at Windsor.
Yeah.
We were very privileged to be awarded the winemaking contract for that. And
well done.
Yeah, so it's been a real privilege to make that wine and have it present. I think my brother, we also made, I think my brother's been to visit her, my dad has, and my brother, I'm hoping it might be my turn in a couple of years. But, to present wines, I'll make it my turn. At some point I'll just muscle my way in and go, surely it's my turn now. But I think, when it comes to presenting a bottle of wine, it's good to have the winemakers there to do so. I think that's the way it should be. So it's been a real privilege. And I think 2011 was the first vintage, and we're moving on with that as well. And provided we keep doing a really good job, I'm hoping we can keep hold of that contract. But it's a lovely contract to have.
Absolutely. I mean, we've just got hold of them for our store to sell. So it's an absolute privilege.
Yeah.
I think it's amazing. Oh, congratulations.
No problem.
Right, if we move on to spare time, should we say, or outside of wine, if the world exists.
Interest, yeah.
You're keen sailing, you touched a little bit on this.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to say that I spend every weekend sort of bobbing around on a boat in the Solent, but alas, no, those days have now been taken with 2 children. A vineyard working, the other parts, but very enjoyable parts of life that have come along. So my children are 14 and 12, 2 boys. They are very active, sporty kids. So a lot of my free time is spent on rugby pitches and cricket this time of year. So we do spend a lot of time with them doing that side of things. I think, certainly in the last 4 years, I would say that the business has taken up more of the time than you perhaps would like, because it's just been going through a growth phase. Yeah. So I think I'm trying, at the moment the job is to try and rebalance that now, so that we can get the work life, and a lot of the time it's getting the right resource into the business, and that takes time to think about. Actually, what do we need? When do we need it?
Where do you invest?
Yeah, and those sorts of things. But I think you can sort of see the end of that cycle happening in the next couple of years.
So do you think you will go back to any sailing? Or?
We're going on a sailing holiday this year. So I've made that. The kids are now. So I left it a bit because I didn't want them to hate it, and then we never get to go. So I've got them old enough now where I'm sure they're going to enjoy it. We're doing a flotilla holiday in Greece.
Push them over the edge.
Exactly. I was trying to hedge my bets. I thought it'd be best to start them off in somewhere warm and sunny rather than like we're going out on the Solent in a Force 8 and putting them off for life.
Just off England.
Exactly. Anyway. So I'm hoping if I can get their interest in it in those calmer waters, then I might then at some point be able to because there's loads of I have been looking into it, so I'm obviously desperate to get back into it. My brother does a lot of racing and sailing on a Sunday, but I wouldn't mind like chartering boats locally. And you can share charters and things like that from where we are. So to have the odd weekend or day out here or there on the boat would just be brilliant. I love it. So a great way to relax.
Especially with the recent summers that we've had.
I know.
It's just been wonderful.
Yeah.
So what do you see as your next goals for you personally, for Ridgeview? I mean, I know obviously you just touched on just a bit more sailing, but beyond that, as it were, for you.
Yeah, it's interesting. We have we catch up quite regularly as families, as a family members, and just sort of talk about what everyone would like to do. I think that's the important thing, is that we're all integrated in a way. So if somebody wants to do something quite random, it will impact on perhaps other parts of or other people's lives. So not that we stifle each other, but we just have that communication in terms of, right, where do you want to be in 5 years? Where do you want to be in 10 years? What are your thoughts? And I think there is I think we're all very committed, certainly in that medium term, to be pretty much hands-on in the business still. But I would imagine from then on, it would be nice to be able to be more consultative, a little bit stepping back, enjoying other bits of life. Yeah, enjoying some other parts of life as well, a bit more whilst you've got your fitness and your health and all that sort of stuff. To keep you going, and again, that's probably very rose-tinted spectacles, looking to the future, and there'll be plenty of ups and downs in between then, and you never know what life's going to throw at you, so you could suddenly go off on a tangent. But I think the most important thing is you keep talking about those sorts of things, and you don't shy away from them, because then you know what you need to do. So if in 5 years everybody does want to start thinking about, well, we need to look at who we're bringing in to replace those bits, and you have to start looking at that now. Because it takes a long time to find the right people and train and get used to it, etc. So, those sorts of things are being sort of looked at.
Keeping things fresh, as it were.
Yeah, exactly. You need new ideas. You need new energy in the business. Otherwise, it can get a bit stale. You do want someone. You need people who will take you out of your comfort zone as well, and make suggestions that maybe. But you need to be embracing those sorts of things, within reason. You don't want to go too crazy, but as long as it's in a controlled way and looking at doing different things and trialing different things, I think it's really important.
So that sounds like as you said, an extension of your family, because you were mentioning earlier how you all have your different input with ideas.
Yeah.
If you're happy to bring in staff within that too, and your brand, and just continue to grow.
Yeah, exactly. It's finding the right people, and actually, we've been very lucky and fortunate to find really good people. People stick around with us for a long time. There are certain areas of the business where there's a bit more churn, but you'd expect that in terms of the winemaking side, because people will learn their trade here and go off into the industry. We've had quite a few of the other head winemakers in sort of key positions in the English wine industry have come through Ridgeview, and have learnt their skills through here, and then gone off and honed them in under their own winemaking, head winemaking roles in other businesses, which I think is the way it will be. So as long as we understand that, then it's fine. You just know that you're that sort of training ground, and that's a lovely thing to be able to give back to the industry too.
Well, it's good to be established, and as you say,
exactly.
it's good to be able to give that to
and at least we know we're going to be churning out good winemakers as well. Really important. Yeah, exactly. Doing it all the right way. Yeah.
Is there anything else you'd like to touch on? Anything you'd like to say?
I don't think so. I mean, I suppose the one thing that we haven't really spoken about are my extraterrestrial activities within the industry. So I'm also on the board of WineGB. And have been since it's in fact I was on the English Wine Producers Board, and then went into the WineGB board. So, and also I'm on the board for the Wine and Spirits Trade Association, WSTA. And I do think we've always had quite an outward looking sort of philosophy here in terms of, to get the best for the industry, we do need to be putting the legwork into these other organisations to make sure our voice is heard, being heard in the right way, the messages are getting across, and to raise the profile of the industry as a collective rather than just Ridgeview. So we've always been prepared to put those extra hours in those other areas. In order to do so, whether it be on sort of subcommittees in terms of winemaking, marketing, viticulture. So we've always been very much around that sort of development of the industry too. And I know Mardi and I went out to Provine a few years ago and looked at it. And from a Ridgeview's perspective, we went there, but we came back and basically said to the English Wine Producers and WineGB, we need to go collectively.
Right.
There's no point us all going out individually. If we don't do it collectively, we'll just get lost in this kind of huge things. And then the following year, we had a collective English wine stand there, which has been sort of followed on for the last 4 years at least. And it's things like that, it's actually having not only, you've got to, your business is really important and you've got to keep it, but you do need to bring the industry with you and keep everyone on the same page and do what's good for you all in order for the industry as a whole to survive and be successful and sustainable.
I think, as you say, despite how well the English wine industry is doing, it is important that we stay together and keep that focus, because in the global sense, it's still relatively small.
Absolutely right. We're a tiny thing, globally, and in order to have a voice, we need to be collective in certain areas, particularly export as well.
Absolutely. Brilliant. Thank you so much. That's such a great way to wrap up. Thank you.
Oh, pleasure. Thank you.